what it's like for you living on the autism spectrum.
When I was a little girl, I was caught in a cyclone with my family. We were in Darwin. And I remember my dad taking me up a little ramp towards the evacuation centre, and the wind being so strong it nearly blew me off the ramp. And Dad fighting with all his will to keep me on the ramp because I was little and it was a cyclone. And for the majority of my life, my difference, the things that made me excluded and isolated, and what I later found out was my autism, I assumed that that was the cyclone, that it was the thing that was pushing me off course, it was the thing that buffeted me and took me down. But actually, my autism is my protector, it's my shield, it's more like my dad, it's the thing that brings me up. It's given me intense passion and intense drive and vividness in my life that I think many people don't experience. So it's a very different experience than I think we often see a lot of deficit spaces around. We often see autism as the cyclone, but I see autism as a different sort of place in my life.
Mel, the day-to-day living for you, what does it feel like, or how does it sort of experience for you in words that might help people who are not on the spectrum understand?
I live life in Technicolor. Everything is intense and vivid and sharp. So smells, senses, those are things that maybe people will hear a lot about, that I cover my ears. I don't like lots of loud noises. I hear things that other people don't hear. But I also notice beauty where other people don't. I see detail where other people don't. I make connections, and I live my life with a passion that burns inside of me that is huge and lifts me up. So my life is intense, and sometimes that's really tiring, but usually it's just invigorating, and it brings me to a place of great joy.
We all experience challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced being a person living with autism?
I think the biggest challenge I've experienced is isolation and exclusion, that for most of my life, people haven't seen me for who I am or accepted that that's who I am or understood who I am. And because of that, I masked, which means that I wake up in the morning and put on a mask of a different person who I think will be more acceptable and who people might like more. And it takes a very long time to deconstruct that mask and find out who I am. So I have been denied, because I was diagnosed late, I've been denied an identity of knowing who I am. And I think that's a huge challenge, because it's very hard to live your life authentically and to love people if you're not sure who you are intrinsically. So that's a huge thing. And anxiety. With autism, it's not every person with autism has anxiety, but certainly I have anxiety in large quantities. So I feel that that's a challenge that I battle with, and those sorts of mental health issues are quite intense sometimes.
Mel, what are some of the wonderful experiences that you've had?
As I said, I tell these things in stories. So when I was 7, I went to the Tower of London with my family, and I fell in love with medieval history. And from that moment on until this, it has been my driving passion. And when other kids at school were interested in boys and didn't know what they wanted to do or were exploring other things, I had this drive that all I wanted to do was be a medievalist, and that was where I was going. And it's pushed me along. There is such great joy in being an expert, is so deeply in things and being so passionate about that. But I'm also a mum to 3 amazing autistic children, and if I wasn't autistic, they wouldn't be autistic, and if they weren't autistic, they wouldn't be who they are. And I can't imagine them in any other way than how they are. So my autism has given me my 3 amazing children, and that's my tears, and they light up my life. So,
Mel, if the Prime Minister was sitting here right now, what would you say to him about how society could better support people with autism?
I think many people will have heard about the NDIS and sorts of issues around support and funding, but I think much of our funding, much of our support for autistic people comes because we don't experience acceptance on a broad scale. So I would love to see our Prime Minister starting a conversation, a dialogue around what acceptance and inclusion is, not just for autistics, but for all minority groups. It would be amazing to see him living those kinds of commitments to inclusion and acceptance, because I suspect that whilst funding and the NDIS, whether we are included on List A or List B and all of those kinds of current issues, will be less important if we could just be ourselves in a society that accepted who we are and saw that we were beautiful and valued and valuable members of the community.
And Mel, finally, is there any one last thing you'd like to say?
We often measure people by how they contribute to society, and sometimes because our world is not geared for autistic people to succeed necessarily, we are often judged as lacking because we don't contribute in a typical way to our community, to our society. And I would like to leave with a message that my autism is beautiful and it's joyful, and it's not because I can contribute or I don't or I do, and it's not because I have some savant skills that I can offer the world. It's because I'm a human being and I deserve to be seen as beautiful just for being, not because of something that I contribute, not because I live to a particular standard that other people judge me by.